Hello, welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I'm Ken Coughlin, that's Ben Lander. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk. For those of you who don't know the premise of the show, basically it's just Ben and I sitting around a table talking about whatever, but always from a Christian perspective. I mean, we're trying to really take that motto to heart. Water cooler conversation, what are people talking about around the water cooler, and what should Christians take out of it? So let's get going. We got a few things we want to chat about today. The first one, I don't know how much conversation we're going to have, but I don't think we can not talk about it. It's a very big thing in the news that just happened, and that is Kobe Bryant, unfortunately, regrettably passed away in a helicopter crash on Sunday morning. So I think we first want to obviously express our condolences to everyone who's affected. And I will say that I'm very pleased as much as you can be in these circumstances today, more so than I was yesterday. Today we're filming this on Monday, just so you know. When it first happened on Sunday, of course, all the footage was Kobe Bryant, Kobe Bryant, Kobe
Right.
Bryant. That's what everybody was reporting. And, I mean, that's the world we live in. He's the celebrity,
Right.
you know. But even yesterday they were reporting 5 people deceased. Now it looks like it's up to 9 that were actually on board the helicopter. And my wife didn't know that. She's giving me a shocked look from behind camera right now.
I wasn't aware until you told me off camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was all Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and then the...
Well, yeah, that was the first thing that
and-
came out. The first was just Kobe Bryant. Then they announced that his daughter, his 13-year-old daughter, I believe Gianna, I think is her name,
Yes.
was with him. But then today we're starting to see not just reporting that there were more people, but I did actually see a number of articles on who those people were. I think one of the surviving family members of one of them was actually on the Today Show this morning. And so, because that's always my concern is like, you know, I get it. This one person is the one that, you know, America knew, so to speak.
Right.
But there's a lot of other people that are affected by this, and you wonder how they feel when they don't see their loved ones up there represented. It was like there was another player. His daughter was on a basketball team that day. I think they were on their way to one of their games, actually. There was an assistant coach on there. There was another player and the other player's mother. There was a local baseball coach and his wife and daughter that were on it. Obviously the pilot, and I'm sure I'm missing some people. But I was pleased to see that others were getting some recognition. And I do remember there was one, I think it was the assistant basketball coach's daughter. You know, she left behind a husband and three children. I believe it was 3. And one of the daughters, upon seeing a story come on the TV about the crash, and of course at this time it was all Kobe Bryant, Kobe Bryant, Kobe Bryant, made a comment that she was, I guess, glad to see that the rest of the country was mourning with them. But anyway, any thoughts you had on it?
Yeah, just I'd be interested as the investigation unfolds as to how it happened. And we do know it was his personal aircraft. Of course, he wasn't piloting it, like
Right.
you were saying. But, yeah, that's kind of the typical when these tragedies happen. People always go to the question of why, you know. And from a Christian perspective, we can take that as, you know, people always question God. You know, why does God allow this to happen? But just to know that there are things in the world, we live in a broken world, that death is a reality of. Even though Jesus has conquered death, we are still subject to that death, the first death. And so we certainly, although as Christians, we have the hope of a resurrection after death. And so that is, you know, every time, and this is, you know, not to get too preachy, although it's a Christian perspective, so it's going to be my take on it, is every funeral that I do, I always try to bring it back to the gospel. And I think, you know, some people have their opinions whether or not that's appropriate, but I think it's the absolute most appropriate time, is because people, during challenging times like this, when they're grieving, when they're mourning, they're looking for answers, they're looking for comfort. And I think the greatest comfort and hope that we have is in Jesus Christ, that for those who are in Him, death doesn't have the final say, doesn't have the final answer. And so, of course, we don't know exactly where everybody on that plane was in their relationship with God, and that's for Him to sort out. But we certainly do pray for the family, for their comfort, for the peace of the Lord to be with them. And so, you know, we extend our condolences and our prayers to all of them.
Yeah, well said. So the other thing, the next thing we wanted to talk about, that we kind of knew ahead of time we could be talking about was the March for Life.
Yeah.
So I got the privilege of getting to attend the March for Life last week on Friday. It was the first time I'd actually been. Have you ever been to a march before?
I have not.
You have not. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of walking.
Yes. Or marching.
Or marching. Well, it's funny. Okay, so they have the rally on the National Mall, and then everybody lines up on Constitution Avenue, and we all got out on Constitution Avenue, and then we were just standing there. Must have been at least good 45 minutes where we just weren't moving. So the joke was, well, at least we're standing for life, So
yeah, everything I saw, like all the pictures and footage, is just tens of thousands of people.
Well, I wonder. Of course, everybody there was saying 500,000. I don't know if it was 500,000. I have no idea how they count these things. And I think you've got the people that when you're there and amongst the throngs of everybody, then you start to think, you probably think it's higher than it really is. Whereas media tends to report that it's lower than it actually is. Sure. But it was a lot of people. It was an awful lot of people, and I wonder how much more crowded it was because President Trump decided he was going to come speak to it. Mm-hmm. So, but that was kind of neat. So I did get. I was there as a representative with the North American Lutheran Church, our denomination, where our dean of our mission region had asked me to attend. With camera in hand to record, get some footage of it, which I did get. It's not up yet. I haven't had time to edit it all together. We'll get to that as soon as I can. But to kind of document the NALC at the event. So it was kind of neat. But because the president was there, security was dramatically heightened, from my understanding from previous years, where they had they blocked off this whole area of the mall. And there was only one way you could kind of get up into it, and you had to go through these metal detectors, and once you go through them, then you're in the little rally area. And but apparently, once President Trump started speaking, they blocked off they didn't let anybody else through security, and so. I got in there, and I was able to hear him speak a little bit and get some footage of that. But then I found out that all the North American Lutheran Church folks, our contingent, didn't come in through security. They were on the outside. And so I kind of had to duck out a little bit early while he was still speaking to try to go join up with all of them. And I found out that they didn't really have an exit strategy. In other words, they had all the security to keep people from coming in, but they didn't have a designated exit from the rally area, so I couldn't actually get out very easily, except having to eventually let me out through the middle, this little middle section. I had to go through all the big giant crowds in order to weave my way back to where the NALC folks were. But there were actually far more people outside the rally area than there were inside that weren't able to get through. Yeah. And so if anybody saw pictures of like the rally and you think that's everybody that was there, that wasn't even half the number of people that were there. I mean, it was astronomically more than that. But okay, so here's, I'll get into a few humorous anecdotes in a minute, but here's my thought, and I don't know if this is going to make me popular or unpopular, or maybe a mix of both. But people are always asking me, what do you think of the president's speech? You got to hear the president speak. What do you think about it? I have made no bones about it. As far on the show before, I've mentioned that I am not affiliated with any political party. I'm a registered independent. So if you're hoping that I was going to be on your team or the other team, sorry to disappoint you, unless you're an independent. Hey, we're all on Jesus' team, though, and that's the point, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway, so my question is, when does, and this is what I was thinking, I was listening to him speak, when does a good cause, a cause that Christians are rallying behind and supporting, when does it become, I don't know if tainted is the right word, hijacked, maybe that's a good word, to be a little bit more about the politics and less about the issue.
Yeah.
I want to give President Trump a lot of credit. He absolutely was the first president to speak live at a March for Life. He has done a lot for pro-life causes while he's been in office, and he definitely does deserve credit for that. That being said, also part of me couldn't help but wonder, gee, he's coming this year. He hasn't come the previous years. I wonder if the fact that it's an election year has anything to do with it. And, he starts out his speech, and he was saying some very positive and things that were about the issue itself. He was commenting on how the large number of people that were there that were actually very young individuals, and how that's indicative of, a younger generation growing up into this pro-life cause. But then inevitably, at some point the conversation turns to, and let me tell you about all these other senators here that are rallying for you, and let me rattle off my track record and everything that I've done for you.
Sure.
And so I don't know whether I can't even articulate maybe the question I'm trying to bring up, but all I know is that I left with mixed feelings after hearing it, because I felt like there was a political component to it that really almost seemed more like a political rally, and I worry about that distracting from the unity. I mean, there were people from all sorts of Christian denominations. There was a group there called Secular Pro-Life, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but I've had some dealings with them, that aren't religious at all, but all coming together to rally around the pro-life cause. At what point do we do more harm than good, I guess, is maybe the right way. And I don't know if
politicizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, actually, I was encouraged. Now, again, I wasn't there, so you kind of have a better feel, a better pulse of what it was like. But from what I saw in some of the media and some of the interviews, just with people interviewing, yes, I saw one with President Trump, but also one of just the people that were there. And one comment kind of stuck out to me was a younger man had said, a lot of people make it about the politics, but we're here. He said a lot of people say it's either a Democrat thing or a Republican thing. He said, but really it's just a life thing. And that was kind of encouraging to me that he intentionally saw that temptation to make it a political thing and was just coming back and saying, no, it's a life thing. That's why we're all here. We're rallying around the same cause. It's about the cause, not the politics. And again, going back to, when it is an election year and when we go to vote, I think we talked about this briefly on the last Trinity Talk Live, was, we had said at the last election, we did a whole series on voting and what if there's no good candidate and how do I vote and everything. But the thing that we tried to encourage people on was vote based on the issues, what you weigh based on the issues. And again, not to make it a political thing. And I know this is going away from what your original question was.
He's dodging the question.
No, I'm just sidestepping to get back to it. What a politician. No. Anyway, all that to say, I was encouraged, at least from what I saw, that they tried to, at least the people who were there, seemed to recognize it as not a political thing, but a rally thing. And maybe that's people who have been there for years. And maybe it did have more of a political feel this year because President Trump was there. I'm sure it did. I guess your question was, or you were trying to say, like, how do we, or when does it become too much, or how do we...
Yeah.
How do we keep the focus on the issue?
Maybe that's a better way of putting it. How do we keep it on the issue and not... Because I guarantee you there were people there that were somewhat alienated by some of the times it took more of a political turn. I mean, you mentioned the Democrat versus Republican thing. There was a point in President Trump's speech where he flat out started calling out Democrats, and I don't... It's not that I disagree with him as far as, if you look at certain politicians of that party have not been favorable to pro-life causes. He's absolutely right about that. Right. And so it's a balancing act as far as, I guess, when does it become too self-serving political? When does the risk of alienation, especially when your audience, you may have had Democrats there that were at the rally, people that were registered Democrats, but still believed in pro-life causes and were there. So at what point do we cross the line too much to where we're alienating people for reasons that we don't need to, that aren't necessarily related to the issue at hand?
And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the rhetoric that's used. That's why I think it's important to keep the focus on calling it a pro-life rally, not an anti-abortion rally. Because as soon as you say that you're standing against something that's automatically confrontational, automatically sets up that division, sets up that wall. Like anybody who, if your party, for lack of a better comparison, if your party tends to lean towards one side of the issue or another, then you're automatically labeled. If we try not to slap labels on things and make it more about life, if we stand for something, we're standing for, yes, life, but the totality of life, from conception to death. It's more than, and that's, I guess, predominantly the reason for the rally is prenatal life is the reason for it. But I think we could expand that to be pro-life, meaning let's focus on some other issues. And maybe that's getting too Maybe that's overstepping. Maybe,
but that's what the Life Conference does. For those who don't know, the North American Lutheran Church held a Life Conference here at Trinity the day before the rally, and that's, I mean, they don't. Obviously, abortion is one of the issues they focus on, but not exclusively. I mean, they talk about. We had a speaker here this year about suicide in post-traumatic stress disorder. Although she didn't want to call it a disorder, but I'll let you watch it. It's on our channel if you want to watch her presentation in our military services. And so, I mean, you certainly can meld those together. Whether or not this rally is the right or the march is the right time to do that, I don't know. So, anyway, did I interrupt you?
No, and I think you're right that, and that's kind of where I was going with the Lutherans for Life. It's more than just the abortion issue, which that's definitely a big part of it, but it's suicide, it's quality of life for everybody, and that's kind of what we want to take to heart. So how do we keep that the focus and not politicize it? I think we just keep it on the issue, kind of like what I was saying. It's a life issue, so we affirm all lives matter. We've got these, again, that's the whole Black Lives Matter, whatever, lives matter. All life matters, and that's kind of the rallying cry. I think the danger with all of these things is to kind of slap banners or labels and everything, because that's easy. It's easier to remember. It's easier to kind of rally behind something that's got a quick little quip to it, and maybe the whole life issue is a lot bigger than we can just kind of slap a label on. So that's the challenge. But that's also what we can take heart in, is there's so much there to affirm. There's so much in the totality of life. There's infancy, there's foster programs, adoption, you can go through every stage of life, and there's something that you can affirm about life that can kind of redirect our focus to that.
Well, I think what we tend to do, excuse me, is we tend to marginalize life on the extremes. Where before birth, we devalue that life, and unfortunately, it's something maybe we'll talk about in a little bit. Another story that we're going to try to get to at the end of life. We also tend to kind of devalue life some as well, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Funny how these stories kind of
all come together. I know we weren't planning it that way, but that's just a tease. I don't want to go into that story just yet, because I got to lighten it up a little bit, and I got to tell the humorous anecdote. So, so we're at the March for Life, all right, and it was packed. I mean, you shoulder to shoulder, and when the march finally started moving and we're going down the street, it's awfully hard to keep your whole group together. And so what we had a big banner that said, says NALC, and from the womb I knew you, all that scripture verse on there, and this was provided by Pastor Dennis DeMauro, who is the pastor of Trinity Church in Warrenton, Virginia. If you happen to be watching, shout out to Dennis. How you doing? So anyway, but he provides this banner, and it's on these big poles. And so we're walking down the street, down Constitution Avenue, and at one point the banner frame actually breaks, and unfortunately didn't hit anybody in the head. It came close. I think Scott Licht, who's another with Lutherans for Life, another pastor of Lutherans for Life. Shout out to Scott. He actually caught it, and so we kind of shuffle it off to the side, because we were right in the middle of the street and crowds all around us. We shuffle it off to the side, and Dennis is prepared. I don't know if he was a Boy Scout, but let me tell you, there was duct tape there, and that fixes anything. If you don't want it to move, duct tape. If you do, WD-40, right? So we get it off to the side, we lay it down, and he screws some things together, and he wraps it up with duct tape in the corners, gets all ready to go, and we look around, and we all of a sudden look at each other and say, "Where's the bishop?" For those who don't know, we just elected a new bishop in the North American Lutheran Church this past summer. Dan Selbo is our bishop. He's kind of the top of the. I'm not going to get into the way our denomination is structured right now. It's another conversation for another day. But he's the highest elected office, I guess you would say, in the denomination. And he was there at the March for Life, and he was kind of hanging out with our General Secretary Mark Chavez. Because Mark was his ride afterwards. And so my attitude the whole day was, look, as long as the bishop and Mark are together, that's what really matters, because Mark was his ride. So, but then I look around, I see Mark standing right there, and the bishop's nowhere to be found. And so we all kind of freaked out. The one thing you don't want to do is lose your bishop. Fortunately, we started walking again, and the bishop was eventually found, so the disaster was averted. But yeah, we all panicked for a little bit there. So anyway, so it was fun. If you ever have the opportunity to go to the March for Life, I do highly recommend it. You may or may not go into the rally portion. Like I said, a lot of people, more people actually didn't go into the rally. I think that might have been affected by the additional security.
Before we move on to the next topic.
Sure.
I think an important thing to note, too, and this is, for those who might be disappointed that they either couldn't get into the rally itself or couldn't go, period, and were just kind of supportive from home. I think one of the things, and this may be another way to kind of keep the main issue at the forefront and not to politicize it, but to encourage those who are on the pro-life side is, your relation to where the rally's being held doesn't change the efficacy of your support of your prayers, right? So, just like when we pray to God, it's, whether you're praying in a church or praying at home, God hears your prayers regardless. And so the rally is great, and the purpose for it is to raise the awareness, but really the work for pro-life, the cause of pro-life takes place in our everyday, right? You're a pro-life person. It's not just to go to a rally. It's to support life in all aspects of that. And so whether you made it into the rally or not, whether you were just watching it or supporting it from home, I think that's just as important, and that your support may not have been made known at that rally itself, but just the showing that was there was enough evidence that there are people who are very much in support of this issue and very much in support of life. And so just anyway, all that to say, be encouraged, and God hears our prayers regardless, and we can be pro-life without having to necessarily be at the rally.
Yeah, and there were actually a lot of people during the march that had their bullhorns, and they were shouting out to people about, hey, church, it's great that you're here, but is this the only pro-life thing you're doing all year? What else are you doing out there? And, I understand where they're coming from. I think to some of that is unfair as far as the accusation that the church is doing nothing. I mean, there certainly is more going on than just this. I mean, we just had an informational conference the day before,
exactly,
which is available on the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel. You should watch the whole thing if you haven't seen it. Third speaker was okay. The other two were great.
He's pretty great. I like that.
Anyway, but the point is still definitely one that is valid in the sense that the rally is important. It does bring awareness, but are you out there even on your day-to-day basis? Are you trying to engage in conversations with people to talk to them about these issues, or are you just worried about rocking the boat and you're not saying anything? Speaking of that conference, that was what my presentation was about, by the way. So if you are one of those types of people that knows that this issue is important and wants to be talking more about it, but you don't know how to get the conversation or how to navigate your way through it, look on the playlist. It's on this YouTube channel for the NALC Life Conference, and session number 3 is where I actually address exactly that, about how to engage in the conversation, not so much not the what. Not what are the issues or what is the evidence for the pro-life cause, but how to engage in the conversation. So if that's helpful, take a look at that. All right.
And also, since you were, I know we're kind of running late into this one, but since you were at the rally, I'll throw you this question, since you like to throw me curveball.
He's fine. Third episode in this new format. He's finally figured out turnabout can be fair play.
Absolutely. No, just one question that kind of struck me as I was looking through or watching all of the footage that the media has on there. One question stuck out, because there was, you said, a lot of younger presence of millennials, even Gen Z. Why do you think that's the case, that there's such a large presence of younger people that are in support of pro-life?
Well, I got to say, I think, and I'm not a sociologist, so I can't tell you, definitively, but at least in my little anecdotal observation, I think that gets partially back to what we were talking about a second ago. People say, well, church, what are you doing 365 days of the year? I think there has been at least a good portion of the church that has been focusing on young people with this. Case in point, Lutherans for Life, while this was all going on, was also holding a weekend-long or week-long, conference or seminar for people that I think, what did Scott tell me? I think it was ages like 17 to 22 or 15 to 22, something like that, where it was like a camp, basically, where they came. And they didn't just do the march, but they also had a lot of sessions and things like that. And so I think there are efforts being made by those within the pro-life camp to specifically target the younger generation. And then you also have the advent of social media, where you've got groups like Secular Pro-Life, where I mentioned before. Now, I know Facebook isn't for young ones anymore. It's the old fuddy-duddies who use it. But when it first came out, it was popular.
Right.
And so, they do a lot of their work through social media, through their Facebook page and everything. So I think if you can find... I think there's been more of an effort to try to find the avenues that the younger generation is going to and targeting those avenues with the pro-life message. And I think it's having some success.
Yeah.
That's my do you have a completely... Usually when I ask you a question, I already have an answer in mind, or I'm just having fun with you, but I didn't know if you had anything.
Well, I wanted to see your take on it and see if it was true. At least it seemed to be representative, that like what they were showing in the media, that there was a very large representation.
Oh, yeah, we had a whole school... I think people are all from the same school, like right behind us, who were, they were younger folks. I think they probably high school age, and they were, I mean, the chants weren't original, but they were, hey, hey, ho, ho, abortion's got to go, or something like that. I can't remember. Yep. Probably a little bit better than that, but that,
I think that was one of them. Yeah.
They were doing all that all day, but and so there were quite a few of them. It was kind of neat. I forgot to mention this. This is kind of neat too. So speaking of Secular Pro-Life, so their group was right behind us in the march, actually. And while we were sitting there waiting for the march to begin, and we were in these big giant crowds not going anywhere, all of a sudden I hear this voice behind me, and it says, Ken Coughlin. And of course, they always tell you that you're never, if two people go to the march and you don't go together, you're never finding each other, right? Well, lo and behold, and this is a name, see if this name rings a bell to you, it was Clinton Wilcox. Do you remember who Clinton Wilcox is? Clinton Wilcox is the apologist from California who was on the show we did 2 years ago.
Right. I do remember.
I haven't seen him since. I mean, we talk online every now and then, but I haven't seen him since then. But he recognized me and saw me. He was actually, even though he is a Christian, he's a Lutheran, he was walking with the Secular Pro-Life folks. As he explained to me, they published some of his articles. And so he was there supporting them. But he told me there's like 500,000 people, if you believe everybody that was there, and yet Clinton and I ended up right next to each other, and he saw me, so we got to catch up. That was kind of neat.
That's pretty cool.
So, anyway, all right. Next topic. Oh, before we go on to the next topic, I did want to mention, now that we've talked about all this pro-life stuff, a lot of you people watching have probably disagreed with much of what we've said.
Sure.
And we actually do want this show to be interactive, and I mentioned this on the last show, and I'm going to mention it again here. Please feel free, please do comment on the video. If you have any questions that you want us to address in an upcoming show, anything, it can be about the topics we're talking about here. It can be about something completely different. We don't care. Something you've always been wondering about, how to look at this particular topic from a Christian perspective. What should Christians think about X, Y, or Z, whatever. You can comment on the videos. You can comment on our Facebook page, the Trinity Joppa channel Facebook page. Any posts that we put out there, usually on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we put something out with a link to the show. You can comment on those, and we'd be happy to take it up. You can email us. I'll put our email addresses on the screen here. Shoot us an email. Say, hey, Ken, Ben, I was wondering if you could talk about this on the next show. Happy to do it. It is obviously the ultimate goal down the line to get the show to actually be live, so you could we can do live chats and things like that. We're not there yet. But in the meantime, we do want you to be part of the show, to feel like you're part of the show. So please send us those questions, send us those comments. We'd be happy to take them up. As a matter of fact, I'll take one up right now. Somebody did comment on our last episode.
It's pronounced Iran, not Iran.
Yes.
Sorry for that.
Sorry, we messed up the pronunciation. And there was somebody else that said that they thank God every day that God made them an atheist.
Yeah.
We won't even get into the logic or illogic of that statement, but okay. But hey, you know what? If you're not a believer in Christ and you're watching this, please keep watching. That's this is open to everybody. So you're welcome. We're glad you're watching.
The only thing we do ask is just please keep comments respectful and courteous, and we'll offer the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you're not, we'll offer this. We'll offer respect.
we'll still be respectful no matter what.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the last topic we want to talk about today is a big one that's been making the news, especially in Christian circles, but even non-Christian circles. There's a church in Minnesota. If I'm remembering the name correctly, it's Grace United Methodist Church.
I believe so.
Grove United Methodist Church. It was Grove United, and there's reasons I won't say on air, but there's reasons I should have known that, and my wife knows why. But yeah, Grove United Methodist Church in Minnesota, and they have actually 2 campuses. One, and I can't remember the name of this. It's outside of St. Paul, but I can't remember the name of the town that they're located in.
I think that one had to do with Grace, didn't it?
Maybe. But they have two locations. One location that has like 400 people a week on average in attendance, and another one that has like 30. And they're like 8 miles apart. Well, the location that has 30 people attending, the median age is around like 70 years old. I mean, it's an older congregation, and whereas the local community that they're in is actually growing. It's not like the small town that's shrinking. They are in a geographic region that it's getting an influx of population.
It's in Cottage Grove. Sorry, so
Cottage Grove. Nothing to do with Grace whatsoever. But there was another G in there.
Yeah, Grove.
Grove. So we
in Cottage Grove.
2 instances we both thought Grove and was Grace. But anyway, so the United Methodist Church apparently decided that what they wanted to do is they wanted to take the smaller congregation, and they wanted to close down that church facility for a limited period of time. And then they were going to do, I think they were going to do some actual physical renovations to the building as well. They've got a new, I don't know if they called him a pastor or what they called him, a new gentleman who's there to kind of spearhead the revitalization effort. And they're going to reopen in a few months after these things are done. And they want to attract younger congregation members because, like I said, it's median age is like 70, and that's not a recipe for long-term sustainability, obviously. And the controversy comes in. Apparently, they made a decision. I don't know if it was this new revitalization guy or whether it was the lead pastor of the whole camp, of both campuses. But they said, okay, all you current 30 members that are here, you can be part of the transition team and you can help plan out the transition. But once we reopen the smaller campus with all these new efforts, we're going to ask that you stay away from that campus. And that was one clarification point that I do think we need to make sure we make.
Right.
That was not apparently clear in the original article. They were asking them to stay away from that campus for, I think, like 12 to 18 months.
Even after it's open.
Even after it's open, right. And so they wanted them, they were saying, you come to the other campus, but we want you to stay away from this new campus, I guess the implication being because we're trying to attract a younger crowd, and they were afraid of having all of these 70-year-olds there was not going to be conducive to attracting a younger crowd. So you've got some members there that have been there since the campus opened, being asked to stay away from what really amounts to their home church for a year to a year and a half after it reopens so they can try to attract newer people. This didn't go over very well in the general public, and so I'm going to let you start this one off. So what do we think about something like that?
Yeah, well, looking at the original article and then looking at the church's response to it, saying that they were misrepresented, I kind of understand both of that. Being in ministry, we kind of have these conversations, and it's real. It's not just this. The thing about this church is that it's not just this church. It's happening in churches all across America where they are losing membership or having trouble bringing in younger members. And so a lot of the congregation is looking, the median age being much older, 70 or older. And so the fear then is that, once they die off, so is our church, right? And, you hate to say it like that, but that's the reality.
That's the reality.
And so a lot of the effort in doing this, and, like I said, this is not a unique situation. I think, if anything, it's kind of more common than you might think, is, I think they're asking the wrong question. How do we attract these young families versus, how should we be, what let's stop and pray about it, and what does God want our church to look like? And, I'm sure there's a lot of prayer and thought that went into these conversations. But it looks to me like the emphasis was more on opening a new congregation with a fresh start, with fresh faces. And I guess that's where I kind of would question what the thought process was behind it, just for a little bit more clarification, because reading the article, it's not too clear, because I believe the pastor said The reason that they ask the older congregants to stay away is because they want it to be truly new, or truly, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. So I guess what's the plan then is how do they plan on getting new members in? Because that's another issue right there is, whatever that's that old saying, whatever you use to bring somebody in, you're going to have to use to keep them there. So what exactly, that goes back to what's the question? The question is, what do young families want in a church? Because that's the wrong question. The right question is still, how do we be a church in according to God's will? What does God want us to do? How do we worship God? And His Word has a lot to say on that too. But again, going back to whatever you use to bring somebody in, you're going to have to use to keep them there. So if it's I don't know what their plan is. Apparently, it's going to cost about $250,000, which it seems like the larger United Methodist Church is backing them.
Right.
Yeah. So again, that kind of speaks to the fact that it's not a unique thing to this church, that churches across America are feeling this drive to bring
especially my understanding in the United Methodist Church. They're having, nationwide, they're having that kind of issue. All right. I'll start out with my diplomatic statement, and then maybe I'll be even a little more blunt than you. But we'll see. There is a legitimate concern, and I think there is a problem within the Christian church as a whole, where sometimes we get so caught up in the way things have always been done that we're not open to new things, and we start to kind of mistake the way we've always done things with being biblically required, even when it's not. There are certain things that the Bible does have to say, like you say, certainly does say something about worship. There's also a lot of leeway in there. I mean, I have people, talk about, well, we shouldn't be singing contemporary hymns. We should be singing all the traditional hymns. And I kind of want to say, well, you realize at some point in time, your traditional hymns were the contemporary hymns. Exactly. You really want to go back. Let's go back to Gregorian chants. Although I did meet
even before that.
Even before that, right? It's funny because that's the line that I use sometimes. And do you really want to go back to Gregorian chants? And most people will say no. Christian Reed, our youth leader here, was telling me, I can't remember what relative it was of his. Whether it was his mother-in-law, actually likes Gregorian chants, and so I couldn't use that line on her because she would say, okay.
Sure.
But anyway, so there's room to still worship and properly worship, and also be asking questions as far as what's going to be effective in this day and age in that regard. How are people going to worship? And I do think that is a problem sometimes, that the church doesn't. We get too caught up in our human creations rather than what the Bible says about worship. Now, that being said, you don't tell people not to come back. You don't tell people. That's just you just don't. I mean, period. I'm sorry. For a couple of reasons. One, that's not the message we're trying to send. I guess it's. Look, let me put the caveat on that. I know there's scriptural references to when you need to exclude someone. That I'm not speaking of that. Sure. Okay. When someone does need to be, with the purpose of hoping to get them to repent and come back, that you do have to take that drastic step. I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to a situation like this where these people are there, they're worshiping, they've been supporting, they're not, as far as I can tell, I'm not going to get into denominational differences here, but let's just assume, for the sake of argument, they're not doing anything unbiblical. Their church just isn't, growing. You don't ask them not to come back. You're supposed to be welcoming.
To be fair, I think the article did say that they didn't explicitly tell them not to come back. They're not preventing.
It was just suggested.
Exactly. That's the expectation, is that they would stay away in order to create this new, fresh
how welcoming? But seriously, how welcoming does that feel?
Exactly.
It's like, oh, sure, you can come if you still want to, but we really don't want you to. That's basically what it's saying.
That's like telling my kids, we're about to have a new baby, so you guys go stay with your grandparents for 18 months.
Yeah. It's like, come on, you can't do that. The other reason that I think this was a very bad idea is, what kind of congregation are you going to be developing? We have a program, and I've given so many shout-outs to NALC folks today that I feel bad that I don't. Eric Reason. No, it's not Eric Reason. That's not him at all. That's another pastor entirely. I'm forgetting this gentleman's name. We have a program here that I don't think it's necessarily run by the NALC, but we have a close connection with it, called Faith Webbing.
Yeah.
And you don't know the pastor's name who runs the Faith Webbing. His face is right there, and I can't remember his name. if any of you NALC pastors that I have given a shout out to remember this gentleman's name, please put it in the comments below. Yeah. Yes, because I feel horrible that I can't remember his name. But it's a brilliant. I don't even know if program's the right word for it. But
Pacuch, Gary Capuch, no.
I have no idea.
Okay,
so anyway,
that's different.
But the idea behind it is, if you want a healthy church, a strong congregation that really is, you need discipleship. I mean, that's kind of that's the big focus of the NALC is discipleship. And the idea between faith webbing is you have basically people making connections with fellow congregation members who are older than them and that are younger than them. Because we all have the tendency to have our own little clique, our own little group, and that's who we hang out with. And you need to have this web of connections, multi-generational, so that you can be learning from the people who came before, and then you can also be discipling the people that came behind. Absolutely. If you take your older... Now, I understand this church has an issue in the fact that it can't do that because largely it's predominated by this one age group. Mm-hmm. But you don't solve that problem by just bringing in a younger age group, because now who do you have that's going to be discipling them? You're getting rid of your elders, essentially. Right, you know? Exactly. That is a monumentally bad idea in my mind. So there, was I subtle enough?
No, please be a little bit more. Tell us what you really feel. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that in order for and this is kind of like, I listen to Todd Friel sometimes on Wretched Radio, and he talked about, there was one thing about traditional and contemporary services. You have your traditional and contemporary services, and a lot of times, who was it? I forget who it was, but it says it feels like two churches almost sometimes. You know, and usually with your traditional crowd, you got a lot more gray hair in there, a lot more older, average.
You got a couple coming in right there yourself, too.
I know. Don't remind me. And then with the contemporary, you got your younger crowd, and so
he really has no gray hairs whatsoever. By the way,
my wife found one when she was cutting my hair. But when you've got those, for lack of a better word, demographics that you're catering to for a traditional and a contemporary service, because let's face it, that's generally what it is, then it can feel like two separate congregations. And so the church has to all the more be intentional about how you are doing faith webbing, how you are discipling between those two congregations, it's intergenerational. And that was the kind of buzzword that they used anyway in the article, was they're seeking a more intergenerational by taking out the older generation. So
you still only have one generation, folks, if you do it that way. It's just a different generation.
Exactly. You've got the wisdom of the older, more seasoned saints, and more of the exuberance, I guess, of the younger saints that are coming in. The zeal, don't lose your zeal and your enthusiasm. You kind of need all of that melding together for it to be the church. To be, just our strengths and weaknesses. We fill each other's strengths and weaknesses. That's what the body of Christ is designed to do. And so, yes, there's a challenge that they face with not having that younger group of people. But again, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And so I'm interested also to see, because it said there was many years of different approaches that they used to try to get
right, we don't know what they've done.
We don't know what they've done.
Right.
So in all fairness, we still understand that it's difficult, and the culture that we live in is they're not coming to church. People aren't going to.
Well, and part of it may be and what they're doing. I don't know exactly what physical modifications they're making to the building, but it sounds like they are doing some of that.
Sure.
And like it or not, I mean, that may be part of it. A lot of churches out there may not be welcoming, physically welcoming. For like parents with young children. I mean, do you have a nursery for the? Sure. Where is it? If it's across the parking lot from where the actual church building is, maybe a parent isn't as comfortable with that and being that far away from their kid. I mean, there are certain aspects like that I definitely applaud that they're trying to do. But you do that, you make it more welcoming for the younger generation, but you keep the older generation there as well, because you're gonna need that in order to help them grow in Christ. So, anyway, that's what I got to say on it. I don't know if my view was made clearly enough, but hopefully it was. So, hey, thank you all for watching us here today. If you did have any comments on anything that we talked about, please put them in the comment section. Comment on Facebook, comment on Instagram, comment on Twitter, and we will try to get to those in our next program. We are here every other Tuesday. The new shows go up at 12 noon, but obviously you can watch them anytime after that. So thank you very much for watching again. Thank you, Ben, very much. Okay. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Hey, tell people about the show, okay? Share it. Get other people to watch it, all right? We appreciate it. God bless.